Jason Grinnell. I'm one of the channel sales managers here, and really what we want to discuss today is PRTG in general. Make sure you're familiar with Paessler, which is our company. Give you a little bit of background on the company and the tool, but then really focus on PRTG and its application for monitoring data center and cybersecurity practices as well. I have David Morley on the line with me as well. He's one of our pre-sales engineers, so he'll be able to answer a lot of the questions, and he'll also be taking us through a demo as well. And I'm kind of just jumping into some quick facts about Paessler. We've been around for over 25 years. We were founded in Nuremberg, Germany, which is where we are still based. 82% of the Fortune 200 companies use PRTG, and we have over 500,000 users worldwide. And the main purpose of PRTG is for any IT system, network admin. They don't just support one vendor typically. They will have 10, 15 different vendors that they're trying to support. Everyone from HP and Nutanix to Microsoft and Dell. And all of those individual vendors have their own dashboards to kind of monitor and see how everything's performing and be alerted when there are issues. For most people though, 10 to 15 dashboards every day to have to manage and monitor is too many. And that's where PRTG comes in to consolidate all of those into more or less a single pane of glass so you can see everything in one place, get alerted when there are issues or problems starting to arise. And ultimately that really helps to reduce the stress on the admins and save on unplanned downtime, which ultimately saves the company's money. And we do all of this using protocols. So we are agentless when it comes to monitoring itself. And we use everything from SNMP, WMI, DICOM, HL7, JSON, HTTP, pretty much all the major protocols out there we can use to monitor your devices and applications. And then from a monitoring standpoint, using those protocols, we can monitor everything from traditional infrastructure like switches and firewalls and servers to other things within a data center like PDUs and UPSs, physical environmental sensors as well, physical security, security systems, CCTV cameras. So as long as something has an IP address, we can normally monitor it. So specifically PRTG in the data center though, really by using PRTG, you can create a more efficient and reliable data center by monitoring all of the individual applications and devices that make up said data center. Availability and reliability is extremely important. And so being notified when there are issues that are arising with your data center is extremely important. I work with a local company to myself who, before they had a monitoring solution, over a weekend, they had a UPS that overheated and caused a significant amount of damage to the data center of their law office. Since that's happened, they had insurance, they were able to get everything up and running, but now they use PRTG as well to monitor the UPSs, be alerted if there's anything with issues with the batteries, stuff starts to overheat, as well as temperature and smoke and humidity and all of that stuff too. So they're able to kind of see that and get alerts over the weekend if any issues pop up, since no one's in the office during that time. And yeah, that kind of really goes into having a constant eye on what's going on within an individual's critical infrastructure. And you can kind of break down what we do in data centers into 3 individual areas. So you have the traditional network infrastructure, so servers, computers, PDUs, switches, routers, the traffic coming in and out. All of that is kind of bread and butter for PRTG when it comes to monitoring. But we're also able to monitor like building services as well, which are critically important for data centers, like power and cooling. So we leverage OPC-UA, Modbus to be able to monitor HVAC systems, what's going on with any kind of like smart electrical grids, or even like the water coming into a facility, as long as it's going through some sort of like IP-enabled hardware. And so all of that can be alerted to and monitored. And then on the security side, we help to monitor against DDoS attacks. We have what's called an unusual sensor. So if something maybe is not triggering a normal warning or down state, but it's something out of the ordinary, like let's say all of your VMs start rebooting at the same time on Friday evening, that could signal a cybersecurity attack, that someone has gained access to your admin credential and is starting to reset all the passwords, or all of your CPU usage starts to become really high on off hours. All of those would trigger an unusual sensor if they don't breach a warning or a down protocol. And the unusual sensors, and David will probably talk about this a little bit more, are interesting because it's based on historic data that PRTG is collecting. And then fire, water, unauthorized intrusion, so physical security, and the physical environmental sensors as well. And then, PRTG really, it kind of helps cover everything in one single pane of glass, one solution to give you alerts when something's going wrong. And we have, I think, approximately 15 different ways to get alerted, from text, email, Slack, Teams, Amazon simple message notification. So a lot of different ways to get notified. And I would say some of the main reasons customers love us, though, is PRTG is super easy to get installed, set up. Licensing is very straightforward and to the point. And we don't really have a ton of like add-on products. There are some, but they're normally for some unique use cases as well. With that being said, I'm going to pass the baton over to David so you can kind of get a good look at what's going on with PRTG.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Are you able to see my screen now, Jason?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Excellent. So every time I want or show people PRTG, I always start by showing our website. As Jason was saying, Paessler is the company, PRTG is the product. We've been around for a very long time, a sysadmin tool for over 20 years now. Very proud of the fact a lot of people tend to take us with them from job to job. Definitely are, that boots on the ground sysadmin toolkit. We're able to give you monitoring and eyes on everything that you're interested in. Basically anything with an IP address, we're going to be able to monitor. If you're very new to the product and you're looking to learn some more about us, definitely lots of resources here getting started. If you've never heard of PRTG, no idea what a sensor is or a device, definitely highly recommend coming here and checking out some of these videos and webinars. We're not going to get into those basics too much. So if you want to kind of refresh, certainly come and look at these resources here. Also, just all of our documentation, everything is fully readily available, nothing's paywalled, so feel free to check that out. If you have anyone else that's looking to do a free trial of PRTG as well, if you want to just implement it in some of your home environments, you can also come here and snag a new free trial download. That's going to be a 30-day free trial for the on-prem and a 10-day free trial for the hosted. Before I get into talking a little bit more in depth about security and how you're going to monitor security in PRTG, I do kind of want to go over some basics of how we define things as far as cores and probes and how the infrastructure of PRTG works, because that is going to affect how you monitor. And sometimes we do have some confusion over, how we define a probe, a core, a cluster, and that sort of thing. So in its most primitive sense, PRTG is a two-part installation that sits on Windows. It is the PRTG core server and the local probe. The core server basically being the brains of the operation. It's what's generating the UI, sending out those reports, generating the alerts. And then actually the local probe is what communicates with your devices. all communication in PRTG is going through either a probe or a remote probe. So remote probes are used for scalability and distribution. Basically what they do are a couple things. One, they put monitoring a little closer downstream to your network devices or any other device you're trying to monitor, cutting down on that overall traffic back to the core server. And the other main thing is essentially any connection you can't resolve between that core server and a device somewhere, whether that be behind a firewall, branch office, subnet, what have you. These remote probes communicate back to that core server on a single TLS encrypted connection. So that's how a lot of MSPs out there operate, basically dropping those remote probes on their client sites. That infrastructure is also great because if there's ever any disconnect with these remote probes and that core server, they will also keep monitoring those devices downstream, cutting it down on that overall traffic back to the core server. And in the sense of the hosted environment, if you are interested in looking into hosted, if you're running on-prem now currently, we do offer a hosted environment now where essentially we will host all of this in AWS for you. So no need for any Windows licensing of that core server, no need for any maintenance or updating of the PRTG software, and then still giving you that option to implement remote probes to monitor anything locally. One of these systems will run up to 10,000 sensors. When you get to that limit, unfortunately with the hosted, that is a hard stop. It's basically the computational limit of the single on-prem solution. So basically all our customers running over 10,000 sensors for you to be aware of, they are running our enterprise level solution. And that basically gives them unlimited core installations so they can distribute out that monitoring, not be so beholden in some of that performance optimization pieces. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And it also gives them this other piece of software called the IT Ops board. That's basically their single pane of glass to pull in boards, to view everything happening in all those different core implementations. So if you're anywhere near that level, if you're running a single core that's over 10,000 sensors, you're running into performance issues, certainly reach out to us. We can definitely give you a more specific demo to that enterprise solution. But do want to let you know, that remote probe, that structure is going to be very important when it comes to security. Obviously, if you're not using any remote probes and you're opening a lot of this traffic up to the cloud or somewhere, I definitely would recommend, implementing a remote probe to have that monitoring being done locally, because having that all open up to the outside world could cause you some security issues. And now when we get into talking about security, I do always kind of want to preference, PRTG is one of many toolkits that you would be using to monitor security elements. We are certainly not a one-stop shop. We're not a SIM. We're not, a full security deployment. We're going to be one of the tools in your arsenal to help combat cybersecurity or cyber attacks. One thing I always, definitely we have a lot of people coming to us looking for security monitoring, and I find a lot of people, are looking for that kind of one key or, a turnkey solution, basically a one-stop shop. And I would be very careful, one, in just searching for those type of solutions. There is a lot out there now, especially when we're seeing all of this generative AI. The ability to basically stand up entirely fake companies is completely available to anyone now, to create marketing materials, to create lots of things to basically fake you into believing something is real, is going to be more increasingly a risk of your kind of social engineering aspects of cybersecurity threats. So definitely, you need to have a holistic approach to this. You need to be training your employees to be wary of these type of social engineering attacks, because really that's what's going to be make you most vulnerable, and it is that risk is only really increasing as we're seeing the sophistication of these attacks continue to grow. So everything you're going to monitor, absolutely you want to be monitoring your bits and bytes as they flow through Metal. You want to be monitoring bandwidth, traffic, any sort of spikes, any sort of anomalies that occur are definitely going to be how you're going to stay on top of what's happening in your networks. But also, as Jason was saying, when in any sort of colo data center floor plan, there's lots of other elements in there that one could result in just system failure, equipment failure, but also could be a threat for attack. One being, just access to this building itself. physical access to the building, physical access to the racks. We certainly can leverage, monitoring of building access. We can also leverage, smart rack locks, monitoring those, let you know, when they've been open, how many times, and then alert on anything that would be unusual in those. Some other big things, we can definitely monitor your security cameras, making sure those are all up and running. Most of those are running on IP addresses, so we'll be at very least be able to ping them, ensure those are up and running. Also, your battery backups, definitely very, very important as far as just making sure your battery backups are healthy and in good shape. You don't want to find out they're not working when you need them. And then the general things with just that metal itself, that fan speeds, temperatures, there's things like dust accumulation sensors out there now. So when you're thinking about what you can monitor in PRTG, don't limit yourself to believing we can only monitor IT elements. We certainly can monitor more and more of those IoT and OT networks as well. And those are definitely coming under that umbrella of cybersecurity and wanting to keep those as secure as possible. So some other things you want to do in PRTG, definitely let you know we can integrate with any AD. So if you're looking to have a little bit better user control management, not have to be creating your users, certainly look into integrating with an AD. We also can, of course, monitor any of your ADs. Very easy to integrate that in. We have a very easy 4-step process here to integrate your ADs. And again, that's going to help you limit the amount of special one-off users you're going to have to access PRTG. You're going to have a lot more kind of global control over your user groups when you're leveraging those ADs. Do keep in mind, do not ever remove the administrative groups from PRTG. You always want to make sure you have one non-AD administrator account active in PRTG. Some other great tools you're going to want to be using in PRTG to monitor security elements. Of course, you're going to do bandwidth monitoring. You're doing your CPU monitoring of any of those firewalls, any of those systems, just to make sure they're healthy and running. Monitoring your firewall is absolutely going to be extremely important when it comes to any security monitoring, but also really being able to understand the nature of what your traffic is. Whereas before that would kind of be limited to doing packet sniffing or packet capture, which we can absolutely do in PRTG. If you want to do some very traditional packet sniffing, we certainly can do that. But now new technology has basically come in the shape of flows and flow protocols, and we certainly can support those as well. We also support those at no additional cost. So if you've been looking at other, SolarWinds Flow Analyzer or anything like that, these flow sensors are available to any license in PRTG. We don't have any premium sensor packets or anything like that. So certainly look at implementing some of these net flows, JFlow, SFlow, depending on what your device supports. These are really going to be that great way to get that aggregate view of your network traffic, usually out to your ISP. And this is really where you can understand what's the nature of your traffic, who's talking to what, what's talking to people on your network. So you certainly can get your kind of top talkers, your top connections, top protocols, and even your top senders. This can also be filtered. So if you want to just filter that by your knowns and unknowns, again, this is going to be how you do a deep dive into that network traffic and really understand who's talking to what on your network. That's going to be your main way to monitor your traffic. But as Jason was saying, we do have the unusual detection. And this is a very helpful tool when you're doing any sort of traffic monitoring, because it's going to get a 24-hour average and basically your same week, same day kind of rolling averages. So, if all of a sudden you start to see terabytes leaving your network, certainly, that is a cause for concern. And this unusual traffic detection is extremely nice, and that's going to always let you know when something like that happens. To show you how that actually works or ways you can turn that off, so that's going to basically be in the settings right here. So for some reason that's not helping you out, you don't want to get that unusual detection, you want to turn that off. Sorry, unfortunately, you actually have to go to the device level. but that's going to be in the settings. So if you go to any device, you click on settings, and then if you scroll all the way down to advanced network analysis, this is where you can basically turn on and off that unusual detection. So if it's not really doing anything for you, if you're finding it's giving you a lot of false positives, certainly you can disable that. And then you can also adjust how strict that unusual detection wants to be by going into setup, monitoring. You might have to re-authenticate. And then here in this usual detection, this is where you can fine tune how strict you want it to be before it throws that off, both on the 24-hour average and then also on the same time, same week kind of rolling average. So that's where you can adjust those settings, also control how you want to log those events with this unusual detection setting here. Also in this same monitoring kind of set it, you can add additional scanning intervals, just so you're aware. We really do not recommend scanning anything more frequently than 15 seconds. But if you really want to be pinging like every second or something, you certainly can. It is going to drastically increase your CPU load of that core server if you try to do that. Also in here, your similar detection, kind of some recommended sensor detection to show you if you need to be during that auto discovery phase, as also able to enable some of those beta features and things like that as well. So there's going to be some tools for analyzing network traffic, having unusual detection in place to be made aware when you might be experiencing some unusual traffic or some sort of nefarious activity. People, trying to remove a bunch of stuff from your network for some sort of ransomware or just unusual kind of DOS type denial of service type attacks. If you're just seeing some insane amounts of traffic, that NetFlow will also kind of help you isolate where that's coming from. Some other things you're going to want to do for cybersecurity is monitoring of your endpoints, making sure that, if you're using any sort of endpoint management system, CrowdStrike, NinjaOne, any of those services you may have running on your inputs, you certainly can be monitoring them using WMI, a WMI service sensor, just to ensure that they are running. Restart them if they're not. That's an automatic feature of that WMI service sensor. So that's your option there to verify, monitor some of your endpoints. If you're not using any sort of endpoint monitoring with them as well, or if you just kind of want to be able to double check that. You certainly also could be checking for any application running that you don't want to be running, some sort of policy controls or something like that. If you're looking for something your users might be using that you don't want them to be. With those WMI sensors, certainly if you have run into any performance issues with PRTG, you definitely know that those WMI sensors don't operate the same as the rest of our sensors as far as a performance impact standpoint. And if you're ever wondering kind of what that is, always in our sensor search menu, this little green meter, or on any of your sensors, once you click on them on the right-hand side in that toolbox, will let you know what their performance impact is. So your ping sensors, your S&P, way lower impact than things like WMI, flows, those rests. So you do want to be conscious of the scanning interval that you're setting those at, that you're not using too many of those WMI sensors at very short scanning intervals. But I do want to show you some tricks to kind of optimize that performance of those WMI sensors, because we can also use ISS performance counters in place of WMI sensors where it's possible. And again, that will be in the settings. If you come down to advanced Windows options, it'll give you the option to use ISS performance counters or have those just as a fallback. Definitely would recommend, if you can, go ahead and check performance counters and WMI as a fallback. That really will help you reduce some of your traffic, reduce some of that computational load. WMI really is a much more strict authentication. S&P, it's just the same as mostly texting a device and saying, hey, what's up? The device says, not much. I equate WMI to you trying to call your doctor. you're going to call the assistant's going to call that. You're going to go through a lot more hoops before you actually get that text back from that doctor. And that is also completely on the Windows side. We have no control over that, so please be aware. PRTG leverages the capabilities of your devices, so if they make changes, reduce that compatibility with some open source technology, there's not much we can do about that. As far as performance optimization, I'll get into that a little bit more in depth. I do want to talk about some other sensor types that are going to help you out. One will also be the DNS sensor. This is a big, important tool for ensuring you're not getting your DNS records. Someone's not trying to hijack your DNS, any sort of registry key you have. This can also verify that is is stable and nothing is occurring there to that record. Also keep in mind, with that remote probe structure, where you place that probe, where you place that sensor on a probe can also determine how you check, which record you're checking, or if you're checking a website, verifying that it can load. You can also check that from multiple locations by putting that same sensor on multiple different probes. So if you had a very globally distributed network, you wanted to check a loading time from a certain location, having a sensor on a remote probe and then the same sensor on another remote probe, checking something out in the cloud will basically ensure that that website, that everything's loading from all the places that may be where your customers are. So that's how you can verify if something's down in one region, or if there's for some reason it's not acceptable from one of your branches, or if you're having some kind of localized issue there. So keep that in mind, as you're implementing those remote probes. The probes aren't just polling engines. They can also have sensors attached to them themselves. Some sensors, like those packet sniffing sensors, I think flow sensor also will require you communicate directly with a remote probe. So lots of reasons there to implement those remote probes other than just kind of distributing out that monitoring load. On the topic of some of those sensors, also want to make sure you're aware, any of the sensors, if you want to find out a lot more information about them, all the documentation for a sensor is readily available here in that sensor search menu. You can actually click this little question mark right here. That's going to bring up the direct documentation of that sensor. You'll understand exactly what that sensor can monitor, as well as all the things you need to get that sensor hooked up and running. Now with ping, pretty straightforward. We kind of all know no real credentials or authentication need there for IMCP. But for something like maybe you want to monitor some of your Azure, AWS, you want to do an AWS cost sensor and make sure, not really much performance, but just make sure you know what you're spending. Obviously too, you can be monitoring any of those EC2, EBS instances. So lots of options there for cloud monitoring. But here's where that documentation is extremely helpful. Because one, it'll show you everything that this sensor can do and can accomplish, as well as we clearly define, all of the things you need from a device side, from a credential side, to get that sensor hooked up and running. So lots of options there to get support and know, what your sensor is, what you need to do to get that authenticated and get it running. Along those lines, it's also a good time to let you know, if you ever have any project in PRTG that's a bridge too far, whether that be, making one of these nice maps, if you want to kind of showcase one of those data centers, really make a nice shiny map to showcase basically all that kind of that NOC view and that facility, where you really are monitoring a lot more than just that IT landscape. You're monitoring that whole facility itself. We can also work with you on these type of maps, on custom scripts. We can certainly do that now with our professional service consulting hours. So like I said, if there's a bridge too far as a project in PRTG is concerned, you want to get some white glove remote support directly from an engineer at Paessler, this will be your way to do that. You can purchase those hours in buckets of 4, 8, and 20 hours. 4 and 8 usually for your kind of configuration help, setup help, and then those 8 and 20 probably for some more of those custom scripts, creating custom maps and things like that. Some other cool tricks I want to show you in PRTG as well. Now that we have time, not a lot of questions, so I definitely want to make sure this is valuable for y'all. Something I don't see a lot of my users always using, taking advantage of is the libraries feature. This is a very helpful feature and allows you to bucket up sensors outside of that device tree. So if you're looking for, your sensors grouped by priority, or say you want to, see all the sensors of a certain tag, all your, power backup sensors, you can certainly, group those and filter these lists by tags. You can even filter by status. So if you, want to come and see all your down sensors for one group, or all of those warning sensors, because you can always set a warning state to be a little bit lower than what you want it to be a down state. So if you're just trying to look at a snapshot of where you might be concerned, you can certainly place warning statuses on your on any of those sensors, and then use a library to basically filter for that sensor status. So lots of different ways to organize up sensors in PRTG, and that can make it very useful when you're having different technicians that are accessing PRTG. And we certainly can support any of that multi-tenancy. You can have access controls at any stage or group in PRTG. So if you want to have a user log in and only see one probe, one group, you certainly can control that with that user access controls. A couple more things I want to show you. Definitely, if you ever have any issues, if you're running into a need to reach out to us at technical support, I always want to make sure my users are aware of this contact support link here in the bottom right-hand footer. This is a very helpful tool. One, you can basically select to attach screenshots and logs in this initial message. So that's very helpful on my side. My tech support agents basically can start looking at your system right away, address anything they see there. So certainly if you're ever going to reach out to us with technical support, please do use this method. It's going to be the quickest way to get a response and the quickest way for us to basically start looking into your system right away. Jason did talk a little bit about our newer extensions, so I did want to go ahead and go a little bit more into depth with those. These basically got brought in at the end of last year, and are some very interesting new avenues for you to monitor different elements to export out better reports. We do have our new OPC UA server. That's going to be a lot more for very specific industrial side monitoring. So if you are looking at any OT networks that are running SCADA systems, if they're running an OPC UA server, obviously that's going to be a great use. And the main benefit of that is what we're seeing is, a lot of those OT environments that before weren't really considered absolutely large concerns, maybe like 10 years ago. That is definitely not the case now. Cybersecurity of OT networks is paramount as well. So if you're looking to do a little bit more monitoring in there, what we find the main benefit of that integration is a lot of those OT networks aren't actually monitoring their IT elements of those networks. So redundancies on factory floors is always going to be paramount. Those networks are built a lot differently just from a ground up infrastructure standpoint than your normal IT networks. But sometimes they're not monitoring the switches that they're using, or they're not monitoring the order process into the factory. So there could be times when all the factory equipment is running perfectly, but they have a switch that's down, the order process into the factory is down, so they have to wait around for some IT element to get resolved. With this OPC UA server, we're basically going to bring that IT monitoring into the OT landscape, and we're going to bring that OT monitoring into the IT landscape. So basically both those professionals get to benefit from the monitoring happening on either side, and those OT get to leverage PRTG's notifications and alerting. So a lot more robust ways for them to alert out, whereas normally they're kind of just doing very kind of old school text alerting or something like that. Some of the other extensions, we do have our multi-board now. That is basically geared towards enterprise level customers. So it allows them to interact with multiple core installations. And the best feature is it actually allows you to transfer probes between your enterprise installations. So if you are going to that enterprise route, and you're worried about how you want to load balance out into multiple different cores, that multi-board will be your best friend. It's basically going to allow you to transfer probes over to those different cores. We also do have an SLA reporter now. This is going to be a more in-depth SLA reporting tool. Allows you to create more in-depth SLA reports. It allows you to also group up those sensors or devices by those companies. So if you are looking to provide this to a third party for some sort of service that you're providing, this is certainly great. It'll give you that uptime report, allow you to peg any of that against any uptime percentage you're trying to achieve, and give you very detailed reports on that time frame, on each monthly time frame. We also have the PRTG database exporter and the PRTG database observer. These are definitely going to come more when talking about things like application monitoring. Basically, there are different ways for PRTG to interact with SQL databases. One, the database exporter is ways to export things out of PRTG in those more database-friendly formats. And then the database observer is kind of the inverse of that. It's going to allow you to pull those queries directly into PRTG. Whereas before, we can absolutely monitor databases by monitoring the Windows systems that's running on, leveraging things like those ISS performance counters. But with that database observer, you're actually going to be able to monitor directly the queries of the SQL queries or whatever database you're querying. You can monitor that directly with those queries. So whereas before you would have been just getting those performance counters, this is with the database observer able to get those queries directly into PRTG. Again, leverage our ability to alert, create actions based on whatever you're monitoring here. And also being able to pull those into those maps, creating any sort of nice dashboarding, user-generated dashboarding with that maps feature. And then let's kind of wrap it up for my very high-level overview of some of those extensions and cybersecurity in PRTG. Thank you guys very much for your time.